Hey folks, welcome to Chris Wyatt Africa on the Adobe Africa channel here on YouTube on a Wednesday, December 2nd, 2020. Once again, somebody call a cop. I've been robbed. Where did 2020 go? We have been robbed. Anyway, folks, interesting conversation today talking about events on the 5th of December, just a few days away. And my guest today, I'll bring him in just a moment, has been on the channel previously. He was here back in June. I think he was the first person I talked to about Cape secession. I've talked to Phil Craig, who will be my guest in a moment. I've talked to Des Palm and also Hein Marks all about Cape secession. And I think Phil was the first one to come on. He was a guest by popular demand. People asked me to bring him to the channel. He was an interesting guest, interesting background, and we talked a bit about it. So we're going to talk today about the 5th of December, what's coming up on that, because they're sponsoring a march for secession. In addition to that, we're also going to talk a little bit about his organization a bit, because my audience outside of South Africa has been growing of late, and we want to make sure that people are familiar with it. So we know that not everybody watching the stream knows what the Cape Independence Advocacy Group is, or what the heck Cape secession is. Well, what is this Cape secession? Does that mean you like your Batman, you buy a new cape and you leave town? No, that's not what we're talking about. And then we'll also talk maybe a little bit, because I think he might be curious as others about the election here in the U.S., but that's not really a topic. But we'll get into it. Let's see how it goes, folks. And with that, I'm going to welcome in my guest, Phil Craig from the Cape Independent Advocacy Group. Phil, how you doing?
Good, thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be back with you again.
It's a pleasure. Like I said, I think you were the first person I had on to talk about Cape secession. And before we get into the 5th of December, what for viewers outside South Africa, what are we talking about here? What's this cold fusion thing? Do you believe in this cold fusion mumbo jumbo? No, what's this Cape secession? Tell us about that.
So essentially, for those people that don't understand or don't know South Africa terribly well, South Africa is broken into 9 provinces, and since 1994 and the end of apartheid, the 8 of the provinces have always voted for the ANC. The Western Cape has never voted for the ANC, and the 8 provinces just constantly. So effectively, the Western Cape, the one province where Cape Town is located, keeps on voting against the government it gets, and obviously that means we don't really have functional democracy. For 26 years we get the government we didn't want, and we've got no reasonable prospect at any point in the future ever getting the government that we want. So we're looking to break away from South Africa and to form an independent country called the Cape of Good Hope. And in actual fact, South Africa was only formed in 1910. So South Africa as an entity only has existed for 111 years. And the Cape existed for a lot longer than South Africa before South Africa was formed. So effectively, although the borders would change slightly, we're looking to revert to the previous status quo.
Well, a couple of things to note very quickly there. Number one, you said that it wasn't a Freudian slip and it wasn't intentional, but you said South Africa is broken into 9 provinces.
Yeah, it's broken. South Africa is certainly broken.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. South Africa is broken. I think I can make that statement. That's a very genuine statement. I think in virtually every aspect, economically, politically, and now socially as well, with organizations like the domestic terrorist group masquerading as a political party known as the Economic Freedom Fighters, running around breaking the social bonds of cohesion in South Africa with fictitious stories about race and social relations, and parts of the African National Congress as well, doing the same sort of thing. So, okay, so South Africa's broken. That was my statement. Now I won't attribute that to you, but the other
you can attribute it to me all you like. I think that's just a matter of fact.
Okay, well, there we have no dispute on that one. So also, let's talk. You said that the Western Cape keeps getting the government that it doesn't want because it's imposed from above. But wasn't there a period briefly or was it just in Cape Town, or was it the Western Cape, in which the ANC briefly won control through a coalition on the Western Cape?
Sure. Yes, they did. In 1999, so for one period of government, they were a minority government. They had 44% of the vote. So they peaked at 44% of the vote for that one period. They were utterly disastrous and never have been selected again. And they average 31% over the last decade. They currently have 28% of the vote, and they govern with 28% of the vote. And the party that was elected, the Democratic Alliance in the Western Cape, currently has 55% of the vote. Previously had 59% of the vote. So you have the party with 28% of the vote dictating terms to the party with 55% of the vote. that isn't a benign thing for those that don't understand South African politics. There's some pretty contentious policies that the ANC is enacting that certainly aren't in the best interests of the people of the Western Cape. In fact, they are positively discriminatory against the people of the Western Cape. So actually, with a minority, with 28% of the vote, the ANC is actively discriminating against the majority of Western Cape citizens and forcing the government, who got 55% of the vote, to do their bidding, and that's not a healthy situation at all.
Well, interestingly enough, after apartheid, for demographic purposes, but I also think to discriminate against people purposes, the ruling ANC still continues to classify people based on ethnicity. I'm not complaining about doing that, but in the Western Cape, just for people outside of South Africa, let them know, in the Western Cape, 50% of the population is the so-called colored population, the mixed race folks of origin of Khoi, San, European, Malaysian, Indonesian, a mix of those people. And so that's 50% of the population, so a majority roughly, or half. 17% are white or European, for lack of a better term, and about 32% are black Africans. So it's a very different province than anywhere else in South Africa. Nowhere else do you have coloreds who are the majority, except I don't think even in the Northern Cape are coloreds the majority. I could be wrong about that, but it's very different ethnicity mix than anywhere else in South Africa.
Yeah, that's for sure. Look, look, just for correctness, we definitely wouldn't use the term European for whites. Actually, that has become a term of insult and to try and distinguish. And we have to remember that the white history, that the Afrikaans people can trace their lineage back to 1652. So when we're talking about white people in South Africa, we're typically talking about people who've been here sort of 12 and 15 generations. Yep. And it becomes important in this context because one of the calls of the people you talk about, the EFF, and a lot of the things that the minority groups in South Africa are subjected to is calls to go home, and which is completely notional. It's like going to a white American and saying, go home, go back to Ireland, go back to England, or go back to Scandinavia, or, and actually people have got absolutely no roots to the countries that they've been accused of and called home, and wouldn't be allowed into those countries anyway. So it's a notional thing, and this is part of the issue. In '94, there's no getting around the history of South Africa. It's been divisive, and I'm speaking as a white person, and parts of our history as white South Africans is shameful, and we can't hide away from that. But we reached a negotiation in 1994. We agreed to have the Rainbow Nation where everybody belonged, and that agreement has been torn up, spat upon, and trampled on the floor. And minority groups in South Africa are largely treated as second-class citizens, and they want the sins of 15 generations ago to be visited upon the current generation. And unfortunately, perhaps one of the diseases of our time, I don't think it's just in South Africa, is that people try to judge the actions of the past in the context of the present. And the world in 1652 or 1700, 1800 was a very different place to where it is now. And in an era where might was right, people behaved in a different way to how we do now. So it's notional. It's crazy. And organizations like ours are really multiracial. We're quite progressive organizations by no means, and people try to sort of suggest that somehow there's a racial motive, but in actual fact, the Western Cape is the most ethnically diverse population of South Africa, and if we break away, we'll be far more ethnically diverse than South Africa. And when we're looking for secession, we're looking for secession or independence for all of the people of the Western Cape. So all of the racial groups, the whites, the coloreds, the blacks, the Indians, such few as there are in the Western Cape, because they're largely in Natal, KwaZulu-Natal. So there's no degree of ethnicity to this, but actually what we want is we want justice for everybody based upon our humanity and our rights as citizens here in the year 2020. We're not judged on whose ancestor arrived where first and what somebody's great grandfather did to somebody else, because that's just crazy.
No, absolutely. It's astonishing. A couple of things here. A few people in the chat are adding some of the things to what you said when I was already going to address, so let me get to a couple of them. The distortions of history that have been done by the ruling party since it took over. For instance, if you happen to take a trip up to Soweto, next to Gold Reef City, where the Apartheid Museum is, you would be forgiven if you're new to South Africa and walked out thinking, my goodness, the African National Congress is so amazing. They freed South Africa all on their own. Look at all the things they did. They take credit for the Black Consciousness movement, of which they had nothing to do with. That was Steve Biko and other like-minded folks at university. They take credit for so many things like the Freedom Charter, which they're not responsible for. They're simply one of the parties that signed it. It was largely written by white South African Jews who were liberals, the Freedom Charter back in 1955, which was the basis for promulgating a constitution in the first place. They take credit for defeating the South African Defense Force on the battlefield. The only thing they defeated on the battlefield was their own followers, murdering them in Quatro and in camps because they thought they were informants. They rewrite history in such a fashion. Now, lots of so-called victors or winners do this, but it's particularly disturbing in South Africa's life because South Africa's end of apartheid is attributable to many things, not the least of which is the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Red Threat, which the National Party can no longer give as an excuse to convince white voters that it had to stay in power. And there's many other. The Black Sash movement was there. You had Helen Suzman, the lone reed in Parliament for decades, railing against apartheid. It wasn't as if there was no one else fighting apartheid. Even the Pan-African Congress and many liberation movements, not just the African National Congress. But let me just add a little bit of context to that, Phil. So, or not the context, but you mentioned, and I've said this many times, I find it the height of hypocrisy to see people complain or make judgments about Thomas Jefferson and what he did and didn't do 200 years ago using the moral equivalency of today or moral standards of today when we didn't live 200 years ago and it was a very different world. We didn't live in the Roman Empire when slavery was the norm. We didn't live in these other places. And also this selective choices of history. I've taught some classes recently in Africa, and it was amazing to see people who work in the U.S. government who didn't realize that black Africans had been selling slaves for about 1,000 years to Arabs before the transatlantic slave trade ever began. The reason that the Europeans who came to the West African coast there bought slaves is because they were readily available. They didn't create the industry. They just bought into an existing industry. But anyway, judging people on what happened in the past is a very dangerous game because that means in 100 years, when you're judged for what you did today, how do you think people are going to look at you? So think about that. That's what I always tell people. It's just, and then, they just get things wrong, Phil. I mean, I saw a member of parliament, a ANC member of parliament complain, they stole our dignity. They took our land. A black member of the South African Parliament, ANC. When Jan van Riebeck came here 2,000 years ago, they stole it. Stop. Okay, first off, the Bantu peoples only arrived in Southern Africa about 1,600 years ago. We have archaeological evidence of this. It's demonstrably provable. We know this. We can do it from DNA dispersion as well. And they interacted with the Khoisan, whom they abused and chased into the Kalahari, and they took the better land and they moved south. And that's 1,600 years ago. So, white South Africans began arriving in permanent status 348 years ago, not 2,000 years ago. Not even the Bantu were there 2,000 years ago. So anyway, that was a long diatribe. I just thought I'd share some of the stuff for the audience who are outside South Africa. But Phil, what are your thoughts on any of that? Am I hitting the money on the mark, or am I missing that, or what?
Yeah, look, you are. And one of the funny things is, and look, it's an interesting context because if people haven't picked up the accent, that I'm British by birth and moved to South Africa in my mid-30s, so I have a slightly different context. But I identify as South African. I'm married to an Afrikaner. My children are Afrikaans speaking, and so and one of the things that I've learned, if I go back to the UK, if you try to explain South Africa to people outside of South Africa, they just can't grasp it. It's a different world here. And therefore, we have learned to be really, it's a shame, but we are super sensitive ourselves. We censor what we say because there are certain things we know. It doesn't matter what the facts are. There are certain things we just cannot talk about because instantly just the fact of talking about them is socially unacceptable. It's racist. So all of those things you say that are true, but we just steer clear of them all, because it just causes a huge fight, and we have to pick our battles very, very carefully. It's not in some ways politically to be somebody of an ethnic minority in South Africa is not a very easy place to be. You do not have an equal voice, and just the fact of the color of your skin, you are judged before you speak anything, and it doesn't really matter if you bring facts to the table. So what happens with us is we just pick very, very carefully the things that we can talk about because we have to lead people gradually, and we have to somehow build out of this situation. We can't just pack up and go somewhere else. As I say, there are 5 million, 4.5 million white South Africans. There are 3.5 million coloured South Africans. I don't know what the number of the Indians, but let's say a million. So there's 9 million people here who aren't Black African, if we're going to use the expression. And this is our home, and unfortunately we're in a situation where we're greatly outnumbered. We are in the political minority, and we're living in a time where minorities are not treated with the rights that they should be, and we have to find a way to move forward. And there's no point in throwing a stick of dynamite into the room. We have to find a diplomatic and a sensible way forward, and we have to remember that the standards of education in South Africa are absolutely disastrous, and therefore the vast majority of South Africans just do not understand that. They've not been taught history. They really don't know. It's hard for people to comprehend that the majority of South Africans really won't know their own history. But that is the case, and so therefore, you've got to distinguish between a government that's really corrupt and the South African people, who are absolutely, in general, absolutely wonderful, warm people who haven't asked for this, don't deserve this, and for all of the travails that I can come on and say, look, it's tough as a white guy in South Africa. It's a hell of a lot tougher as a black guy in South Africa. If you're living in a squat and in conditions that people in the first world just cannot possibly imagine. So it's not a simple situation, and we've got to negotiate a path forward together, and that's going to be a uniquely South African path.
Well, you said education. I'd have to say education in South Africa is appalling, and it's disgraceful. Yeah. I mean, under apartheid, you had some of the absolute best prep schools on the planet. People would send their kids from all over the world to South Africa to attend some of these elite prep schools to go to because they're based on such great education quality, whether it was in English or Afrikaans, but especially in English schools as well. Now you had lower standards of education in many of what was called the Bantu education system, that was in a derisive, derogatory fashion. But I'd have to say that an awful lot of people I know come from that age group who went to so-called Bantu education, where Black South Africans are demonstrably better educated than kids coming of age today. And for folks outside South Africa is along the English system with this crazy matrix system, which we don't do in the States. We have to take this test and anyway. But that examination, let me do it in American terms. Essentially, it's sort of like an entrance exam to go to university. And in South Africa, they've continually lowered the standards, the passing mark to get into university, from like 70% down to 50%. Today, it's 30%. So think about this, ladies and gentlemen. In order for your son or daughter to go from high school into a university in South Africa, they need to score only 31% on their math skills. Or it's just, did I miss something there, Phil? I mean, is that?
Well, it's even worse. So you're right. It was 30. They've announced for 2020, because of COVID, that they're going to give 5% free to every student. So it's 25%. And you have to bear in mind that in mathematics, they then introduced something called math literacy, because they downgraded maths. So you've got to get 30%. Well, this year, you've got to get 25% in maths literacy, because you couldn't get 30% in maths. And then you have to also consider, I haven't got the exact number, so I'm just guessing. I've read it somewhere, but broadly speaking, something like 70% of maths teachers in South Africa cannot pass the maths exam. So the teacher can't take the exam. So your children have got look, and this is the inequalities that are in South Africa. I have to pay. I can't send my children to a government school. I send my children to a private school, and they get a fantastic education. And we still have that. But often they talk about the level of taxation in South Africa being so high. And it's compared to countries in Europe, that's not what makes it high. What makes it high in South Africa is we pay our tax, but we have to pay again for schools. We pay our tax for hospitals, we pay again for hospitals. We pay our tax for the police, but we must pay again to have private security, because the government just doesn't provide any of the services. But when it comes back to education, and particularly in maths and sciences, you've got teachers who are heavily unionized, who often don't turn up even to school on Mondays and Fridays, who can't pass the exam, and who are trying to teach children who to pass 25 and 30%, and even then 50% of them don't manage that bar. I think they did out of 100 countries in the world, South Africa was ranked at 180. It was South Africa is ranked 179 out of 180 in math skills. So so when and obviously the government tries to make inequalities about the past, and obviously they may well be rooted in the past to some extent. But the ANC closed the teacher training schools, unionized the teachers. and basically the unions refuse to have the teachers tested on their ability. So we can't possibly have racial equality if we're turning out people who frankly, can hardly add up.
Well, and this is on top of the fact that, and I know from personal experience, I've known 2 decades ago when it had already started, qualified white South African teachers who were in schools, public schools teaching, who were pushed into retirement or out of government service in the public schools because they were white. I know someone in Stellenbosch who started her own business because she didn't have any options. She was a qualified teacher and forced out because she was white. And so what we wind up with is, as you just alluded to, is people who are not qualified. Now, before anybody runs off and goes, oh, you're saying things about no, I'm not talking about black or colored or white. I'm talking about unqualified teachers. It doesn't matter. If you're white and you're unqualified, you shouldn't be teaching. If you're black, you're unqualified, you shouldn't be teaching. And then, Phil, if we throw on top of that things like, fortunately, it's not prevalent, well, not pervasive in your province, I don't think, but in places like the Eastern Cape, certainly in KwaZulu-Natal, where it is the norm for male teachers to expect sexual favors from prepubescent and pubescent girls in order to give them grades. So they're sleeping with them before they're should be sexually active, transmitting HIV, chlamydia, syphilis, pregnancy, trauma. You throw that on top of it. Then you have schools, you have children dying in pit latrines because there's no proper toilets 30 years after the end of apartheid, and they want to blame it on apartheid. If you can't build a toilet for kids in schools after 30 years, then one has to wonder why you bought diesel submarines, Gripen fighters, and Corvettes that sit in port in Simonstown. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Well, look, and again, it's difficult because you have to balance. So this is exactly the sort of topics where we walk this knife edge, because the statistics are there, but as soon as you use the statistics, but the danger is that obviously people sort of try to come back and say, look, you've got to see this past, you've got to see, and it's there, and it plays in that. And for me, there's no part. I didn't come to South Africa until 2004. So apartheid ended formally in 1994, informally a long time before that. So personally, I had no part in that, but it doesn't matter. I'm willing to take my fair share of collective responsibility, and I'm not trying to think, but actually what that can't be is the scapegoat and the catch-all for every problem in South Africa, because there's real issues that just aren't getting addressed because we just brush everything under the carpet of apartheid. And one of the statistics you're talking about, I don't know about the statistics around schools and teachers and sexual abuse, but I do know that 70% of South Africans now, 70% of children in school now do not know who their father is. 70% do not know who their father is. That is a massive, massive social crisis, and is not going to leave the next generation in a better place than the last one.
No, it's interesting you make that note here. In the U.S., the growth of illegitimacy has been astounding since the introduction of the welfare state in the 1930s, and it really grew exponentially after the reinforcement of the welfare system with the so-called Great Society, which didn't end poverty. It actually extended poverty and made it deeper in this country. And now we have generational poverty from people who have no ambition to try to get out of it and easily get resources from the state. So we see now illegitimacy rates in America grow, for instance, and I'll mention all the communities just so we're fair and equal here. In the black community, it's 78% of all children are born illegitimately. And in almost every case, it's to a single mother who has to raise that child on her own. And that's not a recipe for success. 78%. That's astounding. In the Hispanic community, it's 45%. That's also shocking. And in the white community, it's 25%. So 1 in 4 white children in this country are born illegitimately. On top of that, Asians, which used to have, it was unheard of for Asian children in this country to be born illegitimately, is now 9%. I mean, 9% would be a crisis in my mind in any community, but 78% is an absolute disaster. And when you talk about it, the immediate response is on this side from the left is, well, in Scandinavia, they don't get married. Yeah, no. But in Scandinavia, people cohabitate. For whatever reason, in Denmark, a man and woman don't get married oftentimes, and they have lots of illegitimate children. But they raise them as a family. So, it's just a question of legal status. And the other thing you get is that, you're making judgment. No, I make no moral judgment. Where people want to dip their wick is not my issue here. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that a nuclear family is critically important for the safe upbringing of children and adjustment to society. And listen, Phil, you mentioned something. We should give you a break here. So you did mention you were born in the UK. You came to South Africa. Look, we all have a cross to bear. We can be forgiven for our shortcomings. So we'll forgive you that you were born in the UK, and we'll just move right past that point and and we'll talk more about South Africa from this stage on.
I love South Africa, and I love the country of my birth. So I'm a proud Brit, and I'm a proud South African, albeit that I want to break away from the other part of South Africa.
Well, I guess you're Cal Provincian or whatever the word would be. I'm not even sure what the noun would be. We'll have to figure that one out if Cape secession actually happens. Well, let's shift a little bit there, Phil, and talk, because we could talk for the whole afternoon, the whole evening about all the shortcomings of the African National Congress-led national governance. But so on the 5th of December, there's this march in the Western Cape. If you could tell us about it. I understand that Cape Independent Advocacy Group, your organization, sponsored the march, and others, I think Jack Miller from Cape Party told me they're going to be there as well. So can you tell us a little bit about the 5th of December? Why is it happening then, and what do you hope to accomplish?
So look, I guess it's the culmination of lots of things. So we organised the march, but we've organised it in conjunction with the other independence groups. So the Cape Party, with Cape Exit, and with the Freedom Front, and actually this is an Afrikaans term, but the Bruin Bemachting Beveeging, which is the Brown Empowerment Movement. So they're the groups, and there's another group called My Independence. It's a collective march that's on behalf of the Cape Independence movement. We're marching together. We just happen to be the people that have organised it on behalf of us all. So it's a collective one. What do we want to achieve? Well, I think that comes back to I guess I probably need to speak briefly about our mandate as an organisation, the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. We're a relatively new a new organisation, and we're not a political party. We don't seek political power, and we don't particularly seek a mandate in our own right. We're a political lobby group, and our primary aims were to get independence into the media so that it's discussed more openly, and to influence the position of political parties, and to increase the visibility of the independence movement. So effectively, we're a kind of we're a lobby group, but we're an instigator rather than the tool itself. And this year has been incredibly successful in terms of our mandate. So we've had some massive successes. Other people have helped too, and all of the other groups have done well. So we don't want to take all of the glory, but as an organisation ourselves, in terms of our personal mandate, we've just had an exceptional period. So if you look back in probably in 2019, there would have been one or two articles about Cape Independence in the media. In 2020, there's probably been 60 or 70, and we've probably written about 30 of those ourselves and had them placed in the media, mostly by us, some through aliases. Which is made for some interesting things as people send us their own articles back. And then the others in people responding to us, which is great because we want to get the debate. And then we wanted to influence the positions of political parties. So the government of the Western Cape, which is the Democratic Alliance, has always been a bit reticent around independence, and they've also been a little bit timid in terms of how they've confronted the ANC. And we set out to really push them, to put pressure on them, because they are the party of governance. It's not about them; it's the fact that they are the party of governance. They can deliver independence, so independence goes through them. And they didn't like talking about Cape Independence. They now have to talk about it left, right, and centre. So all of their leaders are questioned on it, and in fact have got to the point where they just now have to talk about it. And that has been something that we specifically set out to do. If you look at our first interview, in the first week we interviewed, we said we are going to make the DA talk about Cape Independence, and boy, do the DA talk about Cape Independence. And beyond that, and what we've done for the Overton window, the set of views that is now acceptable for people to talk. We've opened up this window so that people can now talk about Cape Independence. And actually, the Democratic Alliance have moved significantly. They now have formally adopted federalism, so they're pushing for federal autonomy, which is just one notch short on the scale of independence. They want to move power from Pretoria to Cape Town. They have just 10 days ago, the Western Cape DA have voted to have some problems in the national legislation fixed so that they can call a provincial referendum, which again is also huge. And their main opposition nationally, in terms of their core voters, which would probably be minority groups, which would be the Freedom Front, that the Freedom Front Plus has come out fully in favour of Cape Independence. And now they're under real pressure in the Western Cape. And we've polled. So in the polling, at the end of this year, we've got to a situation where we show that 53% of DA voters in the Western Cape want independence, and 64% want a referendum on independence. So the majority of the DA's own voters, the party in power, wants independence and a referendum. And their main political opposition now support independence. And so now they're under significant pressure to come to the party, and they are coming to the party. But not yet on independence, but they've moved massively, and that is a real win for the independence movement. When we come to the march, how does that fit into there? Now this is just the next crank up of the pressure. So we've got in a situation where they are engaged on independence. Their own voters want independence. Their main political opposition is pushing for independence, and there's a real danger that they will lose outright power at the next provincial election if they don't support independence. In fact, the polling shows that they will. So they're under intense pressure. And also what they've done in that space, which has been very positive, is they've become much, much more confrontational towards the ANC. And that's something we've been pushing for. And I think because now all of a sudden we're the extreme. The independence movement is now pushing there, and we've suggested to them, and we want them to be that. We want to be that foil. We want the DA to be talking to the ANC and say, guys, if you don't play ball with the Western Cape, this is what's coming. The independence movement is coming, and we're quite happy to be that foil from there. And that has really changed the political dynamics of the Western Cape, and it's changed it very significantly. So, and when we're marching on Saturday, so come to Saturday's march, we are marching with a community called Clutersville. Clutersville is a very poor coloured community in Stellenbosch. It's a community that the DA are in power with. So it's a DA ward. There are some historical significance, or that's pure by chance. So District 6, which a lot of people know in Cape Town, was cleared for apartheid, and a lot of people from District 6 were moved to Clutersville. And Stellenbosch is in many ways a very symbolic town. You know, the Stellenbosch University, the seat of a lot of white Afrikaans power. A lot of people there that would support the DA, and now we are marching with a poor coloured community, which is a DA community, to the mayor, who is a DA mayor, demanding that they listen to us on independence, and that they respect the democratic wishes of the people of the Western Cape, and that if we can show that a majority want independence, they will call a referendum, and that if we then win the referendum, that they will go to battle on our behalf, because they are the democratic elected government and we elected them, and they work for us and not the other way around. So that's the kind of crux of the whole thing. And the significance is, thus far everything's been in the media, it's been on social media, it's kind of been, and that's allowed people to say, look, you know what, this is kind of a white movement, and this is just middle class people, and actually there's got no teeth to this. And obviously on Saturday it's very important for us to show that this is not a white middle class movement. It might be white middle class people who are predominantly writing in the white middle class newspapers, but I promise you it's going to be predominantly poor coloured Western Cape citizens who have been disenfranchised by the system, who have no hope and no expectation of the ANC saving them, but they're looking to the provincial government of the Western Cape, and the DA must either step up and offer some solutions, which means confronting the ANC in a far more aggressive manner than they currently are, or we must get rid of the DA, we must find somebody else who'll do it for us, because we cannot sit here in a turkey shoot and be finished off by the ANC, which is what is going to happen. Things are just going from bad to worse in South Africa. Currency is falling through the floor. Our jobless numbers are through the roof. We're going through downgrade after downgrade from the rating agencies. We've got no investment coming in. Our educational standards are through the floor. We're a ticking time bomb. And actually, now is not the time to fiddle while Rome burns. Somebody needs to take this bull by the horns and actually go. I don't mean physically to battle, but go into battle and take the ANC head on. And in the Western Cape, the DA has got a mandate. It's got a majority mandate of the people of the Western Cape, and we want them to take that mandate, and we want to we want for them to create hell in South Africa, so that the people of the Western Cape come out better. And actually, for us, that's independence. If in that process other things happen in the meantime, all well and good. And I accept that there are other outcomes other than independence, but it doesn't matter. First and foremost, we need an Alexander the Great or a Napoleon or somebody that stands up in the Western Cape and leads the people who are just desperate, because these people living. If you go to Clutersville and you see the conditions that some of these people live in, it's not right, and it shouldn't be there in a country that's so blessed as South Africa. But that's the case, and so we're not putting pressure on the ANC. Now that we couldn't care less about the ANC. The ANC, as far as we're concerned, is just a devil that is beyond salvation. We are not interested in the ANC. We don't expect them to save us. We think nothing of them. We despise them for the criminals and the crooks that they are. But we elected the DA. And we expect them to leave us and to save us. And if they can't, we need to hold them to account, because that's what democracy is about.
Well, that's quite a bit. Folks, you're listening to Chris Wide Africa on the Indaba Africa channel here on YouTube. My special feature guest today is Phil Craig from the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. You see him getting a drink of water there because he just gave us a lot of information on unpack.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all right. I do the same. So I just turnabout's fair play. Having you guys do that, it's cool. But we'll get to the DA here shortly. But I do need to answer a question that was raised earlier. Someone's asking in the chat earlier about now this is unrelated to this, but it does have an impact on what we're talking about. This was Ron von Ryman in the Netherlands. What's the estimate of South African expats living permanent, temporary abroad? Well, that's a disputed figure, Ron. A lot of people give you different figures. What I can tell you is there is some provable information. As I think ICE answered, it's at least 714 or 740,000, something like that. That's definitely the low end of the estimate. High ends have between 3 and 5 million South Africans currently living abroad. And the vast majority living abroad, not because they went there for educational opportunities, that's some tens of thousands, but they've gone abroad because there's no hope, there's no jobs, there's no opportunity, or they've been denied things, or they've been victims of violence and they've tried to flee, escape in South Africa. When I say victims of violence, I'm not talking about white South Africans, I'm talking about all South Africans. Now, there was a trend from 1999, 2000 until about 2010, 2015 that was predominantly white South Africans who left and some coloreds. But since 2010, 2015, it's been a lot of black South Africans trying to get the hell out of Dodge too. So for instance, I can tell you that in Perth in Western Australia, a city out there on the west coast, there are 16,000 Afrikaners in Perth alone. That's not South Africans, that's 16,000 Afrikaners. In the United Kingdom, there are somewhere between 5 to 800,000 South African passport holders in the UK alone. So when we hear 3 to 5 million, 3 to million does not sound like an overly high number. It's probably somewhere above 3 million and probably below 5 million. So let's just take a stab and say 3.8 million and we'll go with that. But the point is this is, and oftentimes is the best and brightest that South Africa has to offer. And instead of, just like Zimbabwe, instead of having Zimbabwean or South African financiers sitting in Cape Town or in Johannesburg and Gauteng, you have them sitting at Canary Wharf and enriching the United Kingdom, which is great for the UK, or sitting in New York City working for UBS or Citibank or Bank of America instead of working in South Africa, which is where they're needed, taking their talents elsewhere. We see lots of talent. I mean, Elon Musk. South Africa could be one of the world's leading e-commerce sites. It could be one of the world's leading space technology countries, but it's not. It's backwards, where people can't even add 2 and 2. They come up with 1.7. That's not 2 and 2. That's 4, actually, last time I checked. But the point is that South Africa's lost so much talent. Why is Elon Musk in America? Because he couldn't become what he is today in South Africa. That's a damning statement. Now, it also says a lot of good things about America, but it's a damning statement about South Africa. South Africa has no reason it can't be just like America. It has the resources. So that's to answer that question. Now, somebody did a little cheeky thing here, Phil. So, I did the dig on you, being from the UK. He said, don't believe a Sudi. So I just, it's for those who don't.
Soti.
Yeah, Sodi. Sorry, Sodi. Yeah, I missed it. My throat's got Sodi. Yeah, don't believe a Sodi. A Sodi is a derogatory term for English-speaking South Africans from Afrikaners. You see, these people can't even get together. But he was just joking. He was being cheeky. But don't believe a Sodi is definitely something that's been out there. Now, so this march. Okay, so it's going to take place in Clotersville, Stellenbosch. Is that where the actual march is taking place?
Yeah, so it's starting in Clutersville, which is a poor suburb of Stellenbosch,
Yep.
and we're marching to the centre of Stellenbosch, where we'll then have some short speeches, and we'll hand over a referendum to the mayor of Stellenbosch.
Now, on Black Monday, which was done on Sunday, but Black Monday this year, Valerie put that together over there in Cape Town, the city of Cape Town, because there was a march on Parliament. They can restrict the number of protesters. They set it at 500, and by and large, they follow that. They required them to do social distancing, and they had to wear masks, and the police were there. It was very peaceful. It was all organized. By comparison, the judge told the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, that they could have 100 demonstrators show up to protest at Brockenfell High School against fictitious racism. And of course, they violated that with somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 armed demonstrators with pungas. For those who don't know, that's a machete. For knob carries, that's that heavy wooden stick with a big knob on the end that the Zulu used to use to crush skulls. And golf clubs. I saw on Al Jazeera they were talking about that the EFF was there to protest racism in a peaceful protest, and they see the smoke from the police firing water cannons and smoke grenades, and the guy's running down the street with a golf club in his hand. I guess he was putting. He went there to putt. It was a 9-wood, so I think he was pitching out of the rough. So anyway, the point is a big comparison. So let me ask this question: do you have any restrictions on size? And if so, what's the size limitations? And if not, how big a crowd are you hoping for?
So look, yes, we do have. So we have the same as the other. We have a 500 person limit, and we must carry out the same things. The COVID restrictions. We must wear masks. Thankfully, I'm going to show you an example here. We're bringing along a number of free Cape Independence masks. If we're going to have to wear masks, we must make them in the flag of the Cape.
Okay, so, listen, Phil. I got to tell you, I don't like wearing diapers on my face. I'm opposed to it because it's ineffective. But I do it where I'm forced to do it because I do obey the law, even if the law is wrong. I fight it legally. But I got to say, I got to have a couple of those face diapers. You got to save them for me.
Well, I will do. So no, we're taking the face masks to be a branding opportunity. How many people are going to be there? We just don't know. The honest answer is we just don't know. This is the first march. South Africans are incredibly, middle-class South Africans are incredibly difficult to get off their couches, actually, and that's to their shame. They'll moan and groan about the terrible future, but actually there's a degree where it's always been so. There's always been so many challenges that actually they just go on. So this is going to be an interesting one. We've worked very hard. I would like to think we originally set a target of between 200 and 500. I'm fairly confident that we'll surpass 200. Let's assume that we won't break the illegal number of 500. And if there's a little more, I'm hoping the police that won't actually be counting. But we certainly won't be burning anything. We won't be taking any weapons. It's going to be peaceful. We're going to be a good example of a multicultural. This is going to be mixed. There's going to be white people there. There's going to be coloured people there. There's going to be some black people there. We are going to be marching together, and hopefully we can show what a rainbow nation truly looks like. Because actually, this is about uplifting everybody in the Western Cape. There's best part of 7 million people in the Western Cape now, and this is about uplifting us all. And the Western Cape, an independent Western Cape, will be successful when we've got rid of the townships. We've created jobs for everybody, and actually we've got people living in decent conditions and not in pigsties, and they're well educated. And at that point in time, all of our other problems will quickly start to fall away. Whatever social and racial divisions we have are a function of the terrible conditions that so many people have to live in. And once we fix those by creating a functional, free market economy where where corruption is under control and where law and order works, then we can attract investment. Then very quickly we'll get people to work, and once we get them to work, we'll get them out of poverty.
Now, you mentioned some of the groups going there. Before I get to that one, so what time is the march scheduled to kick off on Saturday?
So the actual kickoff is 10 o'clock.
10 a.m.
At 9:45 we're doing the briefing. But actually what's happening is we're asking people to get there between 8 and 9:30 if they're coming from out of town. Mm-hmm. So what happens is it's a one-way march. So we've got a free taxi shuttle service. So people coming from outside of Stellenbosch have been asked to drive to the centre of Stellenbosch, which is the end of the march, and then there'll be a free shuttle running from 8 o'clock in the morning till 9:30 to take them to the start of the march, so that when they get to the end of the march, they'll be back by their cars. And then at the end of the march, the shuttle will now take the people from Clutersville who started at the start, and then the same shuttle service will now take the people of Clutersville back home. So that's how it'll work. So people who are coming from out of town should go to Stellenbosch town centre. And for people who live in Clutersville, they just stay there, and then they'll get a lift back home afterwards once we've given them some food and water.
Now, I presume that for those who are coming from outside town or parking the car in that lot, you've got some kind of security, because I suspect that some malicious troublemakers are probably just waiting to cause harm to those participating in the march. But anyway, you don't have to answer that question from an operational security standpoint. Sure. I'm just presuming there's security there, but I would hope. So, so let's some people start arriving at 8:30. I guess I'm going to need to try to find a contact who can link up with me on WhatsApp and send me videos and call, because I think I'll cover the event now. I've been covering all these events for the past several months, starting with the biker rally. I did the biker rally live stream. Then I did the car rally the next week live stream. The Vitkois Monument, Black Monday. I did Senecal on the 6th of October. Then I did it again the 16th of October. So I probably will try to cover this now. Maybe I can talk to you offline. Maybe you can help me out with maybe somebody that's going to do it. But I guess I'll cover this now because it looks to be interesting, and we'll see what happens. You're hoping, I imagine, for some press coverage, and so that's one thing I can offer is it will, international coverage if I can do some live coverage. But even if I'm not able to do a live stream, what I will promise you, Phil, is whatever information I can find after the fact, I will do some videos and talk about what occurred and didn't occur, and maybe we can get some interviews with some of the folks there. Now, you mentioned some groups who are doing this, one of which I never heard of, and one I didn't hear mentioned, and you don't have to address it, but I heard you mention Cape Exit and some other groups, the Cape Party getting involved with this. I didn't hear the ULA, the United Liberty Alliance, and you did mention something called the Brown Empowerment Movement, which I'm unfamiliar with. It was you gave the name in Afrikaans. I've never heard of that. Is that a colored organization?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So there's a couple of colored organisations, but effectively the leader of the Brown Empowerment Movement, let's call it, is a guy called Peter Murray, but he also he stood as the premier candidate for the Freedom Front. So there's some relationship now between them and the Freedom Front. But yeah, you can go to their website. I'll give you that out to there. So they're not, I guess they're more of a symbolic organisation rather than a mass organisation. Not like, say, the Cape Coloured Congress, which is probably much more about feet on the ground. And the Brown Empowerment Movement is probably much more political. And Peter Murray is a very interesting character. He's made some very good speeches in Parliament. He does serve for the Freedom Front in the provincial Parliament. He has challenged Alan Winde directly on a referendum already, he speaks very frankly and passionately on the subject. So he's an interesting guy to interview. So he's somebody you should try and get on your show. But yeah, so that's them, and yeah, they're a good bunch.
No, I'd absolutely love to get him on the program. It'd be wonderful to talk to him. For those who know Chris White Africa, you know that we love coloreds on this channel. Big fan of colored South Africans. Fascinating history of the development of that community, whether it's the Cape Malays or the Griquas or the Baathsters, all the way up as far as Rehoboth. Big fans, and a lot of viewers on the channel actually are colored South Africans. So we're big fans. So I'd love to talk to him. When we had the biker rally, we did see the Khoi and San groups that were protesting outside of the Union Building there in Pretoria, and that was fantastic. Those guys have been there for 2 years waiting for the African National Congress-led government to recognize that they are the indigenous population of South Africa, which they refused to do. For obvious reasons, because then it actually proves the reality that the Bantus are also colonizers, not just white South Africans. So the ANC's not a fan of doing that. All right, so so those groups will be joining as well. That's interesting. This is always a question that comes up. I imagine, I don't know, does the Brown Empowerment Movement? Obviously, we're probably going to see some Cape Exit flags, things like that. Will there be banners and such? And of course, the question will be by the race baiters will be, will we see the racist Union flag? I don't think we'll probably see that.
Which one? The old flag?
Yeah, the old flag, the racist flag. The apartheid flag.
So fascinating. We say no South African flags, no old flags, no new flags. So we've asked people. Funny enough, you would be fine. We've asked people to celebrate the Cape culture. You can bring any of the independence groups flags. You can wear any of the Cape sports teams. You can do if you're part of a Klopser group. You wear anything that celebrates the Cape, and that's exactly right. Perfect. So you will be perfectly suited for the march, and that's what we want people to do. You don't look like a winger.
So I would be in good stead if I showed up this weekend.
You would be in perfect stead. That's exactly how we like to see people dressed.
Unfortunately, it might very soon be the case that this is an American team. That's disappointing. Even though I'm an American, I'm not too thrilled about that. Anyway, but so that's good. It's good to hear. Now, I should note that a few months ago there was this huge brouhaha about the Josie to Stellenbosch March. We're going to show those racists in Stellenbosch. And, supposedly people were walking from Johannesburg to Stellenbosch. Of course, we know that's nonsense. No one walked from Johannesburg to Stellenbosch. They all rocked up in buses and cars. And there's going to be thousands of people. And there are actually more journalists and South African Police Service constables standing around than there were actually these demonstrators that came down to cause trouble in Stellenbosch. So what I'm saying is that this was something that the economic freedom fighters and others tried to organize to draw attention to Stellenbosch, striking at the heart of the racist white South Africans. I find it funny because like 67% of the population of Stellenbosch is colored. Anyway, so it was interesting. But this march, I suspect your march will be far more successful than that abortive little sad Josie to Stellenbosch march that was a couple months ago. Did you see that in the news, the coverage of it?
I did, yeah. I did. We sort of kept an eye on it. Look, I mean, for us, it's an interesting. I mean, the EFF obviously are the fastest growing party in South Africa, which is very dangerous. But I mean, they have a pitifully low presence in the Western Cape. They've got less than 4% of the vote. Nobody of any race supports him in the Western Cape, which makes all of the sort of the Brockenfell protests, just a desperate cry for relevance and division, but something that we're not buying into. At the end of the day, the EFF need to be dealt with the contempt with which they deserve, and and I think like a lot of people, there was a great sense of Schadenfreude when the EFF met their match with the police in Brockenfell. I think a lot of people had been a long time coming.
Yeah, no, it is interesting that they definitely a Pet Zoo film crew who's got an account on YouTube did a really masterfully done video called it the Battle of Brockenfell, the SAPs versus EFFs. And so I played the video on my channel and I did a little bit of Monty Python, in the background. Run away, run away. It was,
I was there actually, and I was there to observe what was going on, and it was very interesting because this is off independence, but actually it's relevant for the march because I think one of the things that South Africans do very badly is understand about taking up political space, and that if you don't take up the political space, somebody else will. And we saw that to a certain extent in Senegal. We had that fantastic one the first time, and then the second for the Senegal Mark II, let's call it. There was a big debate of let's not give the EFF the battle they want. And actually people stayed away, and actually because they kind of stayed away, the EFF really had that as a success. And actually, when it came to Brockenfell, the same things were being said. Brockenfell number one, the same thing. Everybody was obviously there were some unpleasantries there, but in general, people were quite pleased that the EFF had got a bit of a bloody nose, accepting that some of the antics were unacceptable. But when it came to, you got exactly the same thing. Oh, look, you know what? Let's just not turn up. Let's just let the EFF. And I was so against that. I said, you just cannot. At some point, you have to. You're talking to somebody who got expelled from school for punching the school bully on somebody else's behalf. I don't like bullies, and the EFF are bullies. And therefore, I want them. I don't want to physically, violently stand up to them, but actually, you have to take up space. Now, one of the fascinating stories that didn't come out at Brockenfell, but it's a lesson. It's a lesson why people must turn up on Saturday in March, and we must do these things. at the other end of that street, you kind of think this just happened. The EFF turned up and the police suddenly turned on them. No, they didn't. Actually, not everybody did not turn up to Brockenfell. 150 people turned up to Brockenfell number 2, and they were stood at the other end. You never saw them. They were right at the far end. Perhaps you saw the Cape Party being interviewed. They were there, kind of part of that group. There was the Cape Party. There was a couple of security companies, and then there were a lot of residents and concerned people. And they turned up, and for me, it's a very uncomfortable as a British person who's not really used to seeing arms. It was uncomfortable, but that group was heavily armed and openly armed, legally, but bearing guns, complying with the law, keeping them covered, which is the law. But it was very clear, and the police were there with a thing. So at the end of the street where the EFF were due to march was about 30 or 40 armed people waiting for the EFF to defend their property. And the police asked them to disperse, and they refused to disperse. Actually, the policemen came and asked the Cape Party, and the Cape Party did. They went to the residents, and the residents said, the policeman said very nicely, listen, don't you look, we've got this in hand, don't you trust us? And the leader of the residents group said, no, we don't trust you. This is our house, this is our area, and we're standing right here and we're protecting our property. And they did. And what happened then was the EFF now had their stage moved because it was in sight of this space. And I swear that the difference in Brockenfell was that the EFF, the police could not allow the EFF to march down that street, because had they marched down that street, there was going to be bloodshed. And I thank the Lord that there wasn't bloodshed and that they didn't allow them to march down that street. And had that kicked off, that would have probably led to civil war, and it would have been a disaster for everybody. So for me, it's brinkmanship, and it's brinkmanship that I don't want to see, but it's brinkmanship that actually was chosen by the EFF. But the point is, the police didn't just stand up to the EFF. Those people, those 150 people, made the police stand up to the EFF. And had they not been there, I'm absolutely certain that the police would have just let the EFF march down that street, do whatever they wanted to do, and just contain the situation. And that's why it's so important that people stand up and stand up for their rights, because if you don't, then you'll get trampled all over.
Yeah, no, the EFF absolutely violated every little bit of what was going on there. It was they violated the court order. They weren't there peacefully. They played the victim, and they had their willing accomplices in the foreign press who lied about what was happening, like the New York Times, Al Jazeera, and others. That's why I'm so glad that I covered the events live. I wish I'd known you were there. I would have hit you up for some videos and interview. Yeah, I did get some folks from the Freedom Front Plus who provided footage to me, but I didn't have anyone on the ground that I could interview during the events, which was unfortunate. But Brockenfell I think was an important event in for a lot of reasons, as was the EFF's conduct at Senecal on the 16th of October, in which we got this fascinating, wonderful footage of Julius Malema with a 26 police car escort like he's a head of state, and then he's sitting in the courtroom, a place where he has no standing to be present in the court, whereas family members of the person who was murdered weren't even there. So Julius Malema, and he's sitting next to the Minister of Police, Beketsile, which I think is brilliant imagery for all time. And then we see the EFF, who ostensibly came there to do something that's not their responsibility, protect state property, destroying street signs and smashing rubbish bins and leaving the rubbish all over the street. And then I think the height of the Senecal event on the 16th of October was when Big Daddy Liberty interviewed this young lady, EFF regalia, as it was breaking up, and said, "Hey, so what are you here for?" For the case. But what about the case? Against racism. What racism? The whites, I suppose. Yeah. That just spoke volumes. What was going on there. So let me shift gears just a little bit more, Phil, about something here. So you mentioned the DA. Someone asked, will DA flags be welcome? I suspect they will. I don't think you have any objection to that, or did I miss something?
Now, listen, we would absolutely love the DA flags to be there. I think it's absolutely crucial the DA understand that independent supporters are their voters. If the crowd turned up dressed in DA T-shirts and marched on the DA to demand Cape Independence, it would be all my Christmases come at once, because that's the part that the DA is still to a small extent in denial. We've polled it. We know that 65% of independent supporters vote DA. That is who wants, and 53% of DA voters want independence. Largely speaking, independents, rank and file, obviously not everybody, but actually the majority of independent supporters and the majority of DA voters in the Western Cape are the same people. And it's really critical that the DA understand that. So please, if you've got a DA T-shirt, bring it. We want the DA to understand who it is that's marching for independence.
No, absolutely. So now here's something I should talk about very quickly too. But before I do it, let's remind folks are listening to Chris White Africa on the Adaba Africa channel here on YouTube. My special featured guest today on the 2nd of December, 2020. But again, somebody call a cop. I've been robbed. Where is 2020? It was stolen from me and about 9 billion other people. Yeah, I think it's about 9 billion. Yeah, there you go. I haven't done the count this week. I think there's 9 billion of us. Anyway, but my special featured guest today is Phil Craig from the Cape Independent Advocacy Group. We've been talking about the 5th of December. There's a upcoming march this Saturday for Cape Independence. We've talked about that a little bit. Also talked about what his group is and some of the other groups. A little bit about the sad state of affairs in South Africa. And now I've shifted to talking about the Democratic Alliance. Now, a lot of people who are in favor of Cape secession or Cape independence have been critical of the DA, saying the DA has been quiet, they've not done anything, why aren't they active? And from my perspective, from outside South Africa, I said, well, I think the DA finds themselves in a very difficult position when they're competing for roles within the existing country of South Africa. It would be very difficult for them to come out. Now, I'm not defending, I'm just making a statement outside, and you can comment on this. But it'd be very difficult for them to comment in favor of something like breaking the country apart and be considered to be legitimate by. Oops, there's your dog. Be considered, sorry. No, it's okay. Be considered legitimate by the rest of the country. So I think the DA and other political authorities would find themselves in a difficult position. But as I understand, the Freedom Front Plus has actually come out more in favor of Cape secession. So is my assessment of what's the DA's view on this to date unfair or unrealistic, or do they find themselves walking a tightrope? Would you admit that, or would you say it's not true?
No, look, they absolutely walk a tightrope. So first of all, we have to understand that the DA is quite a big organisation. It's the second largest party in South Africa, and it would be like saying in the US, that the Democratic Party believes, or the Republican Party believes, as if everybody in the Republican Party has the same view. The DA there are very widely ranged views inside of the DA. So there are people who are fervently against independence, and there are people who are absolutely for independence in the DA. So what we're talking about is what's their formal policy. And they are moving heavily in the direction of independence, although not absolutely independence itself. And I think they've got two challenges they've got to overcome. One is, of course, they're a national party. So, so there are big concerns about what happens to their voters outside of the Western Cape and how does that affect them. And that's something that they have to consider. And I think that's something they're battling with internally, because you can spin that both ways. Obviously, the natural fear is that those people will feel excluded. But actually, there are other alternative ways to view that, which is, look, you know what? If actually you can get a country and govern it with your own policies and show just what you can do, that arguably you're strengthened in South Africa and not weakened. But that's something they battle with. Then I think there's just the culture of the because we have this situation. We have to understand that the political battles in South Africa, are not clean fights. We're not in a Marquis of Queensberry boxing ring. But unfortunately, we've got a situation where the DA is boxing according to the Marquis of Queensberry rules, and the other person at the end has got a gun and a knife and a pit bull terrier. So one side is trying to stick to the rules, and the other side is just walking all over the rules whenever they want to. Obviously, I to a certain extent, I'm a constitutionalist, but actually there has to be some degree of that. So we push, and I think that's a battle that's also going inside of the DA, and they have made noises, that there are really starting to move that space, and I think we've contributed heavily to that. But I think also there are people inside who also want that outside of us. So we're very much saying, look, at very least, use the fullest extent of the law and every little ounce of grey area. Do you know, come on, you need to start punching below the belt a few times yourself. And a couple of late punches and a punch to the back of the head won't do any harm either. Let's just get stuck in and win this fight. Let's not worry about sticking to the rules. And the DA is the provincial government. They have a provincial parliament. They have the ability to pass legislation. Just get on and pass some laws. Just start doing what you want. Start telling, and they have said they're going to. In that same time as they passed the resolution 10 days ago, they voted that they were going to start defying the government if they were immoral or illogical. Well, that will lead to an awful lot of defying, I have to say. But for me, that's what I want to see. I quite would like to see a constitutional crisis. So if the ANC, so for example, we have this policy, for those that don't know, in South Africa, of affirmative action and BEE, which is Yeah, well, they're terrible policies. They're well-meaning, but I mean, they're terrible. They've just led to corruption and a disaster, and everybody realizes they've failed. And they've enriched a vast number of the government party. Now the DA have now renounced those as policies. They oppose those policies. The people of the Western Cape oppose those policies. So one of the things that we've said to the DA is just defy the government, just refuse to implement those policies where you govern. And there are ways, there are ways to do that legally, but difficultly. So one of the things is, one of the crazy things is we are totally race obsessed. Everything is race obsessed in South Africa. But because of apartheid, we have no legal classification of what color you are. If I declare myself Black African, I'm Black African. So one of the things we're saying to that, and actually there's the head of policy of the DA is actually Black African, Gwen Ngwenya. And Gwen says whenever she fills in a form, she randomly ticks the race box. And she really hopes that somebody will take her to court, but she knows that they never will. So you have the situation that they're doing that. One individual, the head of policy at the DA, is randomly ticking the race boxes, even though she's Black African. And I was so we would say, look, you know what? Do an audit of everybody who works for the Western Cape government, and allow everybody to self-identify as Black African. Then you can get rid of affirmative action. You can get rid of BE, which you say you don't want, and you can comply with the law and actually make the government now change the law. If it's going to have these racist policies, make the government come and pass a policy. Make it reintroduce the pencil test to see if your pencil will hold your hair and therefore you're black. Because that's ludicrous. So rather than us be on the defensive, and that's what I want to see from the DA. I want to see them get a pair of balls, in the right expression, and take the fight back to them and fight dirty, work to rule, and do everything they can, and just stick up for the people of the Western Cape. And we've seen some movement in that direction. We need to see a lot more.
Now, there's a lot of good questions here that are coming up. Let me get one of them. Ginaldo Rose has asked a question in a couple of different fashions. The first time he asked it, I wrote it down. It was about 20 minutes ago, and it was confusing. He wrote it down later on. I didn't catch it. So let me see if I can try to get the gist of it. Ginaldo is saying, basically, he says you want to become a country within a country within Africa, not a geographical location. It'll make more sense as opposed to saying a secession. No, I'm not really sure what he's going out there, but what you're looking for is independence. You're looking. The method is secession from the Union of South Africa. You want to be independent, and then the method for that is secession or breaking away. That's the term in English. But you want independence. You want Cape independence. That's what you're looking for. That's why your group is called the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, right?
Sure. Yeah, we want to establish the Cape of Good Hope, an independent country in Africa. Actually, the first world country in Southern Africa. The Cape of Good Hope.
And of course, now we've talked about this when you were on the program in June. I encourage people to go back and watch that because I can't get to all the questions. People are asking legitimate questions about the efficacy of we can break away, can the country survive? We've talked about this stuff previously, and you can watch my conversations with Phil in June, and then if you want, also with Des Palm and Hein Marks. Whoa, that's going to start a fire. Des Palm and Hein Marks. You can also see those too if you like. But just to address a little bit about this, there is a discussion about the Cape, of course, as you allude to early in the stream, is not the Western Cape. That's a post-1994 creation. The Cape is the Northern, the Eastern Cape. All of that was the Cape Colony. And so I suspect that the hope or the desire is that those provinces might want to break away and join the Western Cape as part of the Cape of Good Hope.
Well, look, so actually, probably not is the honest answer.
Okay.
I think this is where we would, you brought up the differences with the ULA, and I think that's the difference. It's without being disrespectful to the ULA. I'm not really interested in what I want. I'm interested in what can be achieved. At the end of the day, there's no point in trying to fly pigs over rainbows. And unfortunately, that's what the ULA are trying to do. So the bottom line is, you're not going to get independence. You're not going to get a country unless the majority of people in that country want it. That's the fundamental. You're going to need international support, and you're not going to get international support for a minority government anywhere. And the difference between the Western Cape and the other provinces is that the Western Cape has rejected the ANC for 26 years. they've never had a majority. Yes, they were a minority party at one point, but they've never had a majority. Never in 26 years have the majority of people in the Western Cape wanted the ANC. They've always not wanted them. And you don't have that in the other parts. So therefore, and if you look at, I'm not going to get into the international law, but there are certain criteria under international law and a defined territory and the democratic will and so on. These things are all must-haves. So in practice, and the problem with the Eastern Cape and the Northern Cape is they vote ANC. So the Eastern Cape and the Northern Cape have got the government they voted for. I might think it's crazy, but that's the root. That's the truth. So what I think is more likely to happen is that at some point in the negotiations and in the process, parts of the Northern Cape and parts of the Eastern Cape will want to throw their lot in with an independent Western Cape. And actually, again, because we use this rough analogy at this point in time, the DA voters and independent supporters are broadly aligned. They clearly are not exactly aligned. If you look, the southernmost sections of the Northern Cape and the westernmost sections of the Eastern Cape are all DA territory at municipal level. So I suspect the ultimate country will be a little bit bigger than the Western Cape, but it has to be democratically elected. So it'll be the people of the Western Cape, if they choose it, and then probably at some point then at a municipal level, the territories along the border that will want to be in, and where the majority of those people want to be in, then they'll count. The problem with the ULA, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, I think Hein's a great guy, he's working really hard for the thing. It's not, but actually, this kind of notion that somehow, you're going to have this territory and you're going to pick it out and only white and coloured people are going to get to vote is just a little bit fanciful. That's not how it works, unfortunately. The notion, if Hein thinks he can go and sell something to the United Nations that somehow on some vote, people of a certain race are allowed to vote and people of another race aren't allowed to vote, then good luck to him. But I don't see that happening. And it certainly isn't our wish. We're fighting for a non-racial South Africa, or non-racial Western Cape away from South Africa, and that includes everybody of every race. Doesn't accepted that in the territory there is we've got a different demographic profile, and the majority of people in the Western Cape would be classified as ethnic minorities, but we also have to one of the key things under international law is the treatment of ethnic minorities. So South Africa is actually an abuse of many of the regulations in its mistreatment of minorities. But we must remember that when we get an independent Western Cape, ironically, white people will still be an ethnic minority, and as will black people. And actually, we need to make sure we treat them properly. So I am not going to be a hypocrite and say, listen, I don't want to be mistreated as an ethnic minority, but let's have a Western Cape and then we can mistreat somebody else instead. That's how we got here in the first place. We need to move past that.
Absolutely. So there's a couple super chats I need to get to. Before I get to it, Devolve had a question. Devolve asked how a referendum would be defended if it was indeed successful. I think what Devolve means is that, so if you have a referendum and you declare independence, then what do you do? I mean, does the SANDF roll across the borders and arrest the leaders for subversion or something like that? We've talked about it previously, but I mean, maybe just shortly if you can address it.
Sure. Yeah, look, so first of all, a referendum is non-binding. So the referendum is just an expression of the will of the people. So if we think there are various steps, and effectively there are kind of three steps in secession. First of all, you have to have the democratic will of the people, and then afterwards you kind of have to have a negotiation with the country that you're seceding away from. And actually, if you don't resolve your issues there, then you kind of have to go to some form of arbitration, which isn't arbitration, but let's call it arbitration. There are three steps. So the referendum is only step one. It's what the people of the Western Cape want, and it isn't binding. At the end of the day after the referendum, you don't have independence. You just have proof that the people of the Western Cape want independence, and that's what then takes you into your negotiations for independence. And South Africa should understand that. The referendum to end apartheid was the day that 1994 started. The referendum was in 92, I believe. I wasn't here then, and obviously the new government started in 94. So here we are in a situation. So the referendum will come first, but it's not binding. It's just the expression of the will of the people.
Well, the questions are coming 1,000 a mile a minute now. Some really good questions. So, geez, where were these questions 40 minutes ago when the host had to keep the conversation going? No, seriously. Paulie has given a super chat, 70 Rand super chat, says, has Phil ever spoken to Helen Zilla? If so, anything he can tell us? And he says, P.S. Phil seems like a great guy to share a beer around a braai with. Yeah, I'm curious if he knows Helen Zilla too, because I've yet to get her on the channel. I actually reached out to someone, and they said, yeah, we can get Helen on your channel in March. March? I might not be alive. Corona might get me by March. Come on, man.
Phil's a great guy to have a beer with around a braai. Look, there are some questions I can't answer.
Okay, that's fine.
And this is one. We talk to the DA, and we have lines of communication right to the top, and clearly some of that communication is on condition that it's private.
Gotcha. Fair enough. Listen, I've kind of beat up on you a little bit because your UK origins, which I presume are English. You don't sound like a Scot. You don't sound like you're Welsh, but I presume you're English. But I tell you, I just, when you open a forum up publicly, just anyone gets in the door. I mean, look at the Irish have shown up in here. Patty is over here in the chat. I mean, now the Irish are in the door. Who's next, man? We're going to let in next. The Scots?
Well,
Come on, it's out of control.
Listen, I'm like most British people. You must excuse my language, but I'm an utter bastard. We all are. So my mother is Northern Irish. So of my 4 grandparents, you've got Irish, both Northern Irish, Scottish, and English. So I'm a mongrel, But I mean, the irony is, all English people are mongrels. We had the Saxons who were German, the Normans who were French. We had the Scandinavians. We had the Romans. We had the original Celts, which were the ancient Britons. So look, the notion that there's any such thing as a purebred Briton, a purebred South African, a purebred white, a purebred American is complete nonsense. So yeah, we're all mongrels, and that's fine with me.
I take exception to that term. I'm a Viking.
You've certainly got the beard.
Yeah, no, I've also got the battle axe outside. It's right in the other room. I keep it out of sight so that my videos don't get blocked by YouTube by showing weapons online. No, but seriously, no, you're right about that. I mean, it's so when I did my I'm a genealogist as well, and my family history goes back to Scandinavia, of course. And when I did DNA, the results coming back from my DNA were coming back saying that I had lots of Scandinavian heritage, but I have no, within the past millennium, Scandinavian ancestors. Not like people in Minnesota go, oh yeah, Uncle Lars, he came from Norway in 1912, yeah, for sure. He brought the lutefisk over here, yeah, we were loving Uncle Lars. Now, I don't have any of that, but I do have Scandinavian DNA. Why? Because they rocked up in York and East Anglia, and they knocked boots with the folks on the island there, and that's where the DNA came from. So yeah. But let me get to a couple of the questions here very quickly. Hendra says, "Proud mongrels." I love it. Jim G asked a question about a confederacy. I don't. It says confederacy. Why not to emulate Switzerland's success story? I don't think you want a confederacy inside of South Africa, and I'm not sure what confederacy there would be with an independent Cape, unless you divided the new country of the Cape of Good Hope into provinces or lands or states or something like that. I'm not sure where the question is coming from, Jim G.
I know where it's coming from. So a number of the independence groups do favour the Swiss canton system, so a confederate system.
Right.
And from our point of view, it's look. We made a decision to be bipartisan. So I get why some of these ideas are attractive, and actually, from my point of view, if we end up with a cantonal system, that's absolutely fine by me. If we end up without a cantonal system, it's also absolutely fine by me. I just want us to be able to elect our own government. And I think one of the decisions that we made, and one of the dangers of these things is that people get wrapped up into policies, and you have to understand by far, people, funny enough, people get fixated on it. Is it legal? What does the Constitution say? Will the ANC allow it? Will it be peaceful? And actually, they're focused on all the wrong things. By far, the biggest obstacle to Cape independence is getting a mandate of 50% plus one, getting a majority. At this point in time, we polled and we're at 36%. We've got to get to 50%. And actually, that means that we must unite people from every possible position around independence and agree that we'll sort out our political differences after. We've got to unite around the fact that we get to choose our own government, and then later we can vote on which government it is, and actually our political friends can become political opponents afterwards. So that's the danger for me with these systems. Not that they're good ideas, but actually I want to say I want Cape Independence. I don't want to say I want Cape Independence and I want this banking system, or I want Cape Independence and I want that system of government, or I want that independence and I want this language group. For me, then you start splitting the vote and you start making it impossible to ever win the referendum. It comes back to the ULA. Can't ever win the referendum. So the first and foremost thing that the independence movement must be able to do is win the referendum. And for me, therefore, I don't want to put any conditions on that other than it must be a non-racial constitution. And then we want, and the people of the Western Cape must choose their own government. And after we get independence, we can have elections, and different political parties can come and advocate for the different positions, and the people of the Western Cape can choose the one they want best. And if your political party says, listen, we think like the Cape Party want a confederate system, if the Cape Party come and say we want a confederate system, and people vote for the Cape Party because they want that system, that's absolutely fine by me, because I'm a Democrat and I want democracy to prevail.
No, there's some great comments there on it. So look, folks, I got some breaking news. No, it's not related to the U.S. presidential election. This is breaking news from Richard Anderson, who has told us that 10% of his DNA is Boerewors. So
your mother was a naughty woman.
Well, if 10% of your DNA is Boerewors, I'm guessing about 70% of your waistline is a consequence of Boerewors. What'd you say, Richard? Anyway, there's some other stuff here. So Koosbos says, majority of the Khoi speak Afrikaans. Can he speak their language? Ek praat nie Afrikaans nie, maar Phil, I suspect, does, because his children speak it.
Ja, ek praat Afrikaans. My vrou is Afrikaans, my kind is Afrikaans. Ek praat Afrikaans elke dag.
There you go. Look at that. The English can do anything, man. They can even learn Afrikaans. Anyway, but seriously, Patty asked a question about thoughts on expropriation bill. I'm going to answer for you, and then you can answer opposed. Opposed.
Opposed.
I think
why would anybody want it?
No, it's an evil bill. My thoughts on it, Phil, and what I've been warning people all along is don't get fixated on land. It's not about land. That's part of it. The real issue here, because the state can take any land it wants right now, they just have to pay people. And they have the resources. They choose to steal them rather than use them to buy land. They've devoted a total of $35 million to purchase land this year in the budget. Meanwhile, they devoted over $1 billion to save the failed South African Airlines. They've devoted billions of dollars to save Eskom, and only $35 million to buy land. So they're not serious about land. But the expropriation, my point about it is the purpose of expropriation is a political tool to oppress your opposition. Because with expropriation without compensation, you can take people's property, whether it's their stocks, their bonds, their savings, their retirement pension funds, their car, their bucky, their jewelry. You can take anything because it's property. And you could say, listen, if you don't shut up, quit complaining about the government, you're going to be broke tomorrow. And people will shut up. And so that, to me, is the real problem with expropriation. I think it's a political tool to cow the opposition and to steal as well, of course, to steal. So that's my thoughts. If you want to add something to that, you're welcome to it, Phil.
No, look, I think you pretty well covered it. I can't see an upside.
I think we're still stuck on the 10% DNA Boerewors. That one's kind of got us confused there.
It sounds like a very bad film, doesn't it?
It sounds
Triple X.
It sounds like a film with Joe Pesci, like 8 heads in a duffel bag or something like that, you know. But Three Freet says the Khoi supporting independence would be immensely helpful at the international community if it does happen. Is there Khoi support for these secession movements? Does anyone know of that answer?
Yeah. Look, there's massive support amongst the Khois. There are various groups, and we collaborate with the groups. And look, in fairness to the ULA, they've reached an accord with one of the Khoi groups. Then there's the Sovereign State of Good Hope, who are representing another Khoi group.
Wow.
And then there are others. Look, one of the biggest differences between the Khoi groups. So there's a lot of agreement in terms of where we want to get to, but there's a difference in process. So essentially, the Khoi groups aren't really interested in a referendum. So in other words, we want independence based on the democratic will of the people. The Khoi groups want it as the First Nation. And actually, those two things can cohabit. In fact, they do cohabit. We understand that we want the same space, and we're not particularly in conflict. In fact, we understand that we're allies, and actually we communicate and work together. But fundamentally, they're not interested in a referendum. They don't want to vote to find out if they were here first. They know they were here first. They're the indigenous people, and they don't need to have a vote to find it out. And that effectively is the difference.
Yeah, good point. I did miss a super chat from White Diamond Child, 35 Rand. Thank you so much. That was like a stripper chat, no comment. I think just supporting the discussion we got going on. So, yeah, exactly. It was pretty good. I appreciate the super chat. I'm just looking to see if anything more here before we get to where we wrap up. If there's a couple more comments, I think I've got most of the ones that we need to get in here. Jacques Oosthuizen says, how does Phil believe the DA could counter the increasingly popularity of the communist radicals for an impoverished and desperate African electorate? Before Phil answers it, I don't believe that there's increasing popularity for communist radicals. I think that you might be referring to the press coverage of EFF events. EFF has about 11% of the electorate in national elections in 2019, 10.79, and my threshold for them is 15% support. I have said repeatedly they won't go beyond 15% support. I don't think it's possible. And so I'm not sure what you mean by popularity of the communist radicals. It's not popular. It's just that the communists control the government. And those, not everyone in government is a communist, but of course you look senior leadership, the ANC, all of them are card-carrying members of the South African Communist Party. I'll read the question again, Phil. How does Phil believe the DA could counter the increasing popularity of the communist radicals for an impoverished and desperate African electorate? So I think what he's getting at is, how does the DA, and I don't know if you can answer because you're not a DA person necessarily, but how does the DA become more popular with black Africans in South Africa? I think that's what the ultimate question is, as opposed to the economic freedom fighters. What can the DA offer to them? And I can answer that question for half an hour, and I'm not even a supporter of the DA. But if you want to take a stab at it, go ahead.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think, first of all, let's just look, where I might differ with you slightly is that people tend to look at the South African election results as a whole. And because of what I'm advocating for, I don't look at South African election results as a whole. Mm-hmm. I put them on a spreadsheet and I separate off the 8 provinces from the 1 province. And when you start to look at that picture, it looks very different to what people say. So you get this narrative that somehow the support for the ANC is weakening. In the 2019 election, in the combined 8 provinces, the ANC and the EFF combined got 73.1% of the vote, which was the highest ever share that they've had. So support for the ANC and the EFF combined is growing. Yes, there is a migration of support from the ANC to the EFF because the ANC is doing so badly. But actually, that's one of our big leverages. And the DA in those 8 provinces has got 16% of the vote. And actually, one of the conversations we often tease the DA with is to say, look, you say independence isn't achievable, but you say that you governing is. But you've got 16% of the vote in the 8, and actually we've got 36% in the Western Cape wanting independence, which is more unrealistic. So, for me, there is no stopping of that. At this point in time, there is no stopping. Unfortunately, the narrative is that somehow, the ANC and the EFF have been extremely successful at scapegoating the system, apartheid, minorities, and unfortunately that isn't going to be fixed in this generation. There isn't a solution. I think that's the thing. So, and I think that's why we get to Cape Independence. Cape Independence is not the first idea on my mind or most people's mind. It's an act of last resort, but we're at last resort. There is no, I often use the phrase, there is no cavalry coming. We are the cavalry. It's us. At the end of the day, no one's coming to save us. South Africa is going down the tubes and it's not going to be saved. And what we can do is save the Western Cape. But ironically, a saved Western Cape, if the Western Cape gets independence and it suddenly becomes successful and people get lifted out of poverty and we see the townships getting turned into decent housing and so on, then that is perhaps what will save South Africa. That is the time when people in South Africa will look over the border and say, well, hold on a second. You're saying we've only got 1% growth here because of apartheid, but they had apartheid in the Western Cape, but they've got 10% growth next there, and we've got 50% unemployment, and they've got 5% unemployment. And at that point in time, perhaps people will start to believe the DA. So for me, and I think we touched on this point earlier, the DA's only hope, actually, in my mind, is governing an independent Western Cape whilst it still can, and then using that to show the rest of South Africa what it can do as a national government, because it will expose the lies of socialism, of the ANC, of the EFF, and actually it will show that actually it's bad policy and bad implementation that are causing our problems in 2020, not our past.
Great points, Phil. Appreciate that. So just for a little substance, or not substance, but style point for folks here. Some folks, if you're tuning in thinking this is strictly an interview, you're mistaken. Curse Wide Africa is more of a conversation with people of note, people of interest on different topics. So there's a reason I'm here. It's not simply to be a pretend journalist who doesn't know anything about what he's talking about, just asking questions. Mr. Vice President, did you have chocolate or vanilla ice cream? Which was it, sir? No, that's not what this channel is about. So my apologies to folks if that's what you're looking for. I actually know what I'm talking about, and when I talk to my guests, I'm informed. So it's a conversation back and forth, if you haven't picked up on that. Along those lines, Victoria said, Chris, that's unfair. Jacques' question was for Phil to disseminate. I appreciate that, Victoria, but I'm not a mind reader, and Jacques' question wasn't written in the format of, hey, please ask Phil to share this with the world and disseminate it. That's not how it was written. So I asked the question. I answered it from my perspective. Phil just gave his perspective. And then Victoria did ask a question. She says, does Phil's movement have the resources to campaign through all the towns in the territory being claimed? By that, I presume she means in the Western Cape province. Do you have the resources to do it? So that's a fair question.
Yeah, good. No, we don't. We are a so actually you'll be quite surprised at just what we've achieved with what little we've had. At the heart of our movement, we've got no full-time employees. We're all unpaid volunteers with full-time jobs. We raise our monies from donations, and on the back of that, we've achieved some massive things. And obviously we are looking for funders. And we do have conversations, but there's a certain degree, and I think, look, there are some big funders sitting in the wings watching, and we've started to have discussions with those, and I think people are wanting to see proof of concept, and I think people want to see that actually this is something that actually can be done, and increasingly people are starting to be able to come to that table. I actually was surprised because the Freedom Front doesn't have a huge amount of political support in the Western Cape. So I probably had, we had a hand in it, but I'd misunderstood the political significance of the Freedom Front declaring on independence. For me, I thought it was great, but I had totally misunderstood. When in actual fact, it was a political earthquake for South Africa. It was all over the news, and it's all of a sudden, even if people didn't support for Freedom Front, all of a sudden this established fifth biggest political party in South Africa was now openly advocating for Cape Independence, and actually that was one of the things that's massive. I think this march will be another. I think the moves that the DA have started to make are also the same, and I think from that will become funding. But Victoria, if you know a funder, we would absolutely love to hear it. We occasionally, one of the most offensive things that gets said to us, and it gets said to us once in a while, somebody said it to me this week, is you're only doing this for money. You're only in it for the money, and they don't understand that actually I've got a full-time job, and then this is a full-time job and a family, and not one of us has taken 1 cent for this. This is about us giving absolutely everything we have as individuals to try and make a better future for our families and everybody else's families. This really is a labor of love.
Well, there's a question here from Tertia Maritz. It says, I think what she means is Dr. Peter Hammond. It says, Mr. Hammond. I think she means Dr. Peter Hammond, part of the discussion. And the answer is yes, to my knowledge.
Yeah. So we have a thing called the Cape Independence Forum. So the Cape Independence Forum is a loose group. Actually, they're meeting tonight. We meet once a month, and all of the independence groups are part of the forum. And Dr. Peter Hammond is the chairperson of the forum. And look, we've all got slightly different missions, and I think people often get confused and wonder why we aren't one big organisation. We've got points of difference, first of all. But more importantly, that if you're going to build a house, you don't go and hire yourself 6 bricklayers and no electrician. You need a bricklayer, and you need an electrician, and you need a labourer, and you need a plumber. And it's exactly the same with independence. We need political parties, and we've got the Cape Party, and we've got the Freedom Front now. You need lobby groups, and you've got the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. You've got civic groups who are collecting mandates, and you've got Cape Exit, and to an extent you've got the ULA, although they're less focused on the Western Cape. So we have these movements, and then you've got the First Nation groups, the Talon groups, and all of us collaborate on the Cape Independence Forum. But actually, we clearly have got different goals and different missions, but we complement each other.
No, absolutely. It's good stuff. Now, there's a question here. Someone asked a little bit ago. We'll get wrapping up here shortly, Phil. But Jim G asked. He says, "Please ask Phil, what exactly does non-racial mean?" I know what it means to me. What does it mean to you guys?
So for me, it's general. So yeah, I guess racism is such an abused word that there's a fair question. So what does it mean to me? So to me, racism means it means that if I meet somebody, that I judge that person based on their character, on who they are. I don't decide that, hang on a second, because the person I've just met is white, they must be X, Y, and Z. It may turn out that they are X, Y, and Z, and then fine, then that's who they are. But actually, I treat that person as an individual and not part of some group. And for me, non-racialism means that. I mean, it just simply means that the people of the Western Cape are the people of the Western Cape, all of us. And actually, we have our rights in the Constitution. We all have the right to dignity. We have the right to all of the things that go, the right to life, and we're all of equal value, and there's a respect in there, and I think that probably is what I mean by non-racialism. So we're not in a situation in South Africa, and I don't know whether this has been asked from South Africa or not yet. In South Africa, we're such a segregated society. The black people live here, the colored people live there. We define ourselves because government makes us. Everything. Every form we fill in. What's your race? What's your race? Apply for the job. Only this color. Only and that's what we want with us. So ultimately, we want a merited society, and a society, but equally a society that's caring. So. It's a difficult concept, and I'm probably not doing a good job of explaining it, but hopefully I've given you enough of a gist to get to what I mean.
No, I got it. I mean, I seem to remember growing up as a young man, hearing these words as a little kid, not understanding, then as adult, maturing and understanding that I hope that one day in this country we can judge our children based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. I don't know. I heard that somewhere. This dude, I don't know. He was. I think he's from the Protestant Reformation. His name was Martin Luther. Oh wait, no, Martin Luther King. Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah, one of my heroes, Dr. Martin Luther King, a flawed human like all of us, but a brilliant person. And his "I Have a Dream" speech is for the ages, to say the least. Judging people on the content of the character. Absolutely. Rather than simply, when you see somebody. It's a natural human... I'm sorry, go ahead, Phil. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say the other one that I also like, which is the other side of that coin. So I also love that, and I think it has huge context in South Africa, huge, and that absolutely should be a dream for every country, and it certainly is a dream that I would love to have for the independent Western Cape. The other one that came from South Africa from George Bush, I think it was George Bush Senior, but maybe you'll tell me it was Junior. That the soft bigotry of low expectations is the other one, which is phenomenally that I think also sits on the other side of that. That actually we must have expectations that we can't make. We must expect the best of everybody, and everybody must bring their part of it, and that sits on the other side of that.
Well, that's exactly what broad-based black economic empowerment is, the soft bigotry of low expectations. That's what 30% passing grades are. That's the same thing. Affirmative action in the United States. People can't make it on their merit, so we have to give them a leg up. Not only is that patently unfair to everyone else and to that person, perhaps projecting someone they're not prepared for, but it is the soft bigotry of low expectations. It's a phrase I've used repeatedly, and I find it quite insulting. It's like the way that people just make assumptions about people based on their appearance or ethnicity. It's kind of crazy. Let me get to a couple things, Phil, and I'm going to let you go because you've got this meeting coming up. But this is from Nigel. He says he wants you to comment, and we've talked about this previously, and we can't just lay this all on Ronaldo Jose. There's a lot of people that poo-poo the idea of Cape Independence, and Ronaldo's one of them. He thinks it's a waste of time, nothing come of it. But your mission right now is to get a referendum to get a sensing of the public view on it, and so that's the first mission. So, I mean, you want to comment on people who are detractors saying that Cape Independence isn't possible?
Sure. Look, so first of all, look, and it's fair. It's probably the biggest obstacle. It was interesting. Somebody wrote, literally, actually, they got offended when I answered them. Perhaps they didn't expect the answer they got. They wrote on one of our social media feeds. They tried to be clever, and we'd advocated for Cape Independence, and somebody had said, yeah, well, I wanted to have a supermodel as a lover. But I never got one, and you're not going to get Cape Independence. And I replied to him saying, how many supermodels did you actually ask out on a date?
None.
And I replied, yeah, exactly. And I said, look, many people look at me and say, how does such an ugly sod as you get married to such a beautiful woman as my wife? But I asked. I was in the game.
I was in the game. So you got to play the game, right?
You've got to play the game. We certainly won't get Cape Independence if we don't try. And the whole load of countries have achieved independence. So fundamentally, it is achievable. It's difficult. That's the point. Is it's difficult, but it absolutely is achievable. And actually, but we just have to not defeat ourselves, And we haven't got time to go all the stuff. But I promise you, if you delve into the arguments, you'll see there are no legal obstacles. There are no unsurmountable legal obstacles. Economically, it would be a complete winner for us. It's one of those things that absolutely can be done, but people just have to believe it. And one of the things that's sad in South Africa is that we've been so beaten by an incompetent government that actually we have our own soft bigotry of low expectations. Oh, we're powerless. There's nothing we can do. At the end of the day, there's not enough of us. We're just, at the end of the day, we can't help ourselves. Well, we can. We can. And actually, I am living proof of what can be achieved. I'm not a highly qualified man. I'm not a wealthy man. I'm not a man of any stature whatsoever. But we started this movement. And in this movement, we have changed. We've fundamentally changed Western Cape politics. Part-time from my own home, with a handful of other people who are equally committed, and we have fundamentally changed Western Cape politics. And if I, as one ordinary man, can do that, what can we achieve if we stand together and there's 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 of us? And the answer is we can change everything.
Indeed.
What was they said? Give me a place to stand, and I will move the earth.
I'm with you there, Phil. Apathy is your enemy, and then apathy is so prevalent in South Africa. So many South Africans don't vote, especially white South Africans don't. But why should I vote? What does my vote count? Well, first off, your vote doesn't count because you probably think you're voting as a white person. Now, if you're voting as a South African, your vote can count. Namibia has just shown South Africa what can be achieved in local elections. In Namibia, the Southwest Africa People's Organization was PK'd. They were slapped hard about the head, and they have pulled only a bit about 43% of the vote in some elections. They lost control of Swakopmund, Walvis Bay, Windhoek, the south of the country. They retained popularity only in rural areas in the northern part of the country where the Ovambo people and some of the Hereros live. And now there are alternative parties that have risen out of nowhere. This part of the IPC was formed in August and got 17% of the vote in in the regional election and 20+% of the vote in the municipal elections. It's amazing what can be accomplished when people are not apathetic and go out and do something. And this is what I've been arguing outside the Cape context. I've been arguing South Africa since the lockdown was eased back in June. I think maybe it was July. I forget now. The months just fade together. I've been telling South Africans that you and opposition parties should be in the streets, in the townships, in the countryside now, in the labor camps, around the mines, the hostels, everywhere around the country, convincing people of your message, reminding people that it was the ANC that took away your tobacco, took away your alcohol, told you that you couldn't use or buy open-toed shoes because we know the big toe is the primary vector for COVID-19. We all get it from our big toe. And banning e-commerce and all kinds of other idiotic nonsense. This is the party that brought you that. And you shouldn't vote for them. You should vote in the 2020 municipal elections for us, and this is why. But people aren't doing it. Apathy is the enemy, and I think you made the point there. People with a little bit of energy and drive and desire can make things happen regardless of what part of life we're talking about.
Sure.
So I guess I left on a good note. I was going to give you a chance to throw something in there, but
no, listen. I think I'd given a fairly passionate speech, and you added to it too. So I think we're both in agreement. Unfortunately, embarrassingly, the newspaper article, I submitted an article that was published, but the title was changed. But my title was "The Importance of Doing Something." And it was imploring South Africans. For me, it was about Cape Independence, but it was much more than that. It was imploring people to do something, to stand up, to tick the box that says you're a black African, you're a coloured African, to defy the government, to not pay your rates if there's problems in your streets, to just find ways of defying the government. And I used the Gauteng polling project to say, look, you know what? We're used to the government making us pull our hair out, but look at what happened there. Now the people of Gauteng are laughing their socks off, and the government's pulling its hair out, and that's how it must be. And for me, that's why I think it's important that we do something. And in the article I talked about my heroes. My heroes in life were always the sort of the horrible, obnoxious, belligerent people who just stood their ground and changed history. Winston Churchill, Margaret Thatcher, Mahatma Gandhi, and to a certain extent in the Western Cape context, Helen Zille. People who just basically got stuck in, didn't really care if people didn't like them. Maggie I was a great fan of Maggie. She said, if once again it must be 1 against 48, then I shall feel very sorry for the 48. For me, that's that spirit we've got to have. That we can make a difference.
Well, I think we could probably add to it, although he's a very deeply flawed person, someone who dug their heels and doesn't care about whether popular trying to do the right thing. We'd have to probably add Donald Trump to that list for contemporary. He really doesn't care what people think about him. Now, before we go, Patty, I'll give this comment. This is a very good comment from Patty. I said, well, I haven't filled in official documentation as white for at least 10 years. I take African, which is perfectly true. There's only one race, the human race, unless you believe in evolution. Well, even if you believe in evolution, there's only one race, human race today. Homo naledi's gone. The Neanderthals are gone, although some of their DNA resides in some of us, but including me. But the bottom line is that's why I always tell people this whole stupidity of racism. Race is an artificial construction, and it's meant to divide people. And there is one race. We're just one. You got kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genesis, species. I remember that from high school. And we are one species, Homo sapiens. And the proof in the pudding is that you can knock boots with anybody from any other ethnic group, and guess what? You can produce offspring. So that makes you one. So I agree with you. Good point there. Everyone's African. Good stuff. Well, Phil, we run the risk of running all day, so we probably should probably call it here. The march on the 5th, I'll talk to you afterwards, and maybe I can, or later, maybe you can help me out find someone so I can do some coverage of it. But March on the 5th for Cape Independence taking place in Stellenbosch, and at 10 a.m., people coming earlier than that. And if you're coming from outside the area, there's a place to park. If you're curious about it, go to the Cape Independence Advocacy's website, which we put the link in there. Also, there was a question here a few moments ago asking about how someone can join your organization and help out. And we have put the link in there to your website. That'll tell people how to join and support it if you guys want to help out. So there you go. So, Phil, I'll give you the last word here, and then I'll let you leave, and I'll wrap up the stream. And any thoughts, any comments, or Saturday, or just life in general, anything you want to share with us?
No, look, it's been a fantastic chat. Thank you, and thank you for everybody that's been listening. It's always a pleasure to be on. And look, I would love to see as many as people as possible on Saturday. It's a significant day. We need to sort of ratchet up this pressure one more time. Look, I think that last thought we got was the right one. Mustn't give up. This is too beautiful a place, too beautiful a country, too beautiful a part of the world to give up on. We've got to stand and we've got to do something. For me, that's Cape Independence. I believe passionately that's the answer. But actually, if you feel something else is the answer, then that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But whatever you think the solution is, get behind it 100% and make it happen. Don't expect somebody else to do it or for it to come right by itself.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you very much, Phil, for coming on again. It was a pleasure having you back. I didn't have a good excuse to get you back on since June, so I had a good excuse for this one. We'll see if we get another one. By the way, we're having a Christmas show coming up. If you got your kids, you want to tune in for that. It will be a profanity thing. My moderators will be ready to slam people that misbehave in the chat instantly. But I will be dressed as Father Christmas. I don't know if you've seen me wearing my Christmas outfit there. We're going to have some musicians. Giselle will be on the channel. Also, Dupree from here will pop on briefly. Dean Chancey, the American from Texas, who sings a song, It Ain't Easy to Kill a Boar. He'll be appearing. In addition to that, I'm going to ask Monty Jackson if I can get him to come on, and Steve Hofmeyer as well. So we'll have a Christmas special coming up, so you might want to check that out. I'm just trying to get a good audience for that so that the kids can enjoy it. Anyway, but thanks a lot, Phil. Really appreciate it. And we'll get you back on the channel sometime soon. And you're welcome on the channel anytime you like if you've got an issue or topic you'd like to get out to the world, okay? All right, with that, you turned your mic off, turn it back on. So with that, I want to thank you, and we'll let you step out, and then I'll close out the stream.
Cheers. Thanks, Chris. Bye.
All right, cheers. Thanks a lot. That's Phil Craig from the Cape Independent Advocacy Group. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being my guest today, Phil. Appreciate it. There we go. Let me fix the channel real quick. There we go. All right, folks, thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Listen, I'm going to do an unannounced live stream approximately 5 or 10 minutes after this one, in which I'm going to address behavior of people in the chat. I'm getting a little hot full of some of the stuff going on. Also, people coming with fake profiles, attacking my moderators, and people misbehaving in the chat. So I didn't want to disrupt this program. I found it highly disruptive, some of the behavior that was taking place in the chat. And I'm not talking specifically about any particular person. This has been a trend of late, and it needs to stop. stop. I can turn the chat off on for my programs. There's no reason for me to have chat over there. If people want to come in here and just be disruptive, then they need to go elsewhere. There are other channels for that welcome that sort of behavior. This isn't one of them. So I'll have a short chat after this, a live stream, and people are welcome to tune into it, and I'll discussing my thoughts. I encourage all my moderators to show up after I go offline about 10 minutes later, 5-10 minutes later, for the live stream, so that you can be present when I have this. Will I lose my cool? Will I do a rant? Unlikely, but I am going to have a conversation because I'm getting a little bit tired of people wasting other people's time and misbehaving. If you feel aggrieved by this, then perhaps you are a little bit guilty. If you don't feel aggrieved, then you understand what I'm trying to do. So I appreciate that, folks. Anyway, yeah, so Recreation says, I never disrupt, I always just sit in the background. Most people do sit in the background, Recreation, and most people behave themselves in the chat. But we get different people popping in, and we see new profiles that pop up, which are clearly fictitious profiles, people just playing games trying to troll. So I don't want to deal with that here. This was a wonderful conversation with Phil Craig from the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, who is sponsoring this event on Saturday, the 5th of December, in Stellenbosch, a march for Cape Independence. So folks, please pay attention to that. I believe Joe Emilio will be live streaming that. And I think Joe will actually be there. So that's probably why he's going to live stream it. I will attempt to do a live stream as I've done in the past for these other events because it's newsworthy and noteworthy. And because we have an international audience, we want people to know outside South Africa know what's happening, as well as people inside South Africa. There's a news blackout so much on so many things, including the elections here in the U.S. So thanks a lot, folks. And I appreciate it that you all tuned in for this. Thanks to my guest. And we'll be back here shortly in just a few minutes where there'll be an admonition for people misbehaving. Trolls are welcome to show up. Please feel free to come show up in that impromptu live stream I'm having. It'd be lovely to have an example to make of people if you want to misbehave. Trolls are welcome in that stream. For the once and only time I'll welcome trolls to come to my impromptu stream in about 10 minutes. If you want to misbehave, feel free to show up. And it'll just be easy for people to show your ass about how you behave. Anyway, folks, thanks a lot for this. I'll be on with the Night Owls edition a little bit later, and we'll be talking about news of the day, try to do some updates on the election here in the States and what's happening and not happening. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thanks for the super chats, White Diamond Child, for the stripper chat. Appreciate it. And also for the other chat we got from, oh gosh, who gave me, I put myself on the spot by mentioning the chats here. I think there were two other super chats. Just want to get to them very quickly. One was Paulie, I think, if I'm not mistaken, but let me just get to that very quickly if my email will ever work. Here we go. So just waiting for it to come up now. But we'll talk about news later in the day and what's happening and what's not happening. Just want to very quickly. Oh, this is not what I want. I'm looking for the wrong thing now. Now I've got myself all excited. By the way, how are we doing on memberships on the channel? We are okay. We're about the same. And for super chats, let me just get to the super chats today. So Paul, it was Paulie, in fact. White Diamond Child gave a couple of super chats, or one, and it was Paulie. So I made sure I covered it all. Thank you guys for the super chats. Appreciate it. We'll catch you guys back here on the Night Owls edition in about an hour and 40 minutes. Thanks a lot. But I'll be back in about 10 minutes with an impromptu live stream talking about conduct and behavior on YouTube chats. So thanks a lot, folks. God bless. We'll catch you later here on Chris Wyatt Africa on the Night Owls edition. Let me turn off my camera. There you go.